Okay, Amiad Cohen, thanks so much for joining me here in Miami.
Thank you for having me.
Um, I want to get right into it because there's a lot of topics I really want to cover here. The alt-right and also the alt-left attacking foreign aid to Israel. I think it's a strategic disaster for Israel to continue receiving foreign aid. I think it introduces a host of problems. What's your take on how Israel, first of all, do you agree that Israel should wean off of foreign aid from America? And two, how is that done?
So first of all, yes, we published a very important piece called the New Dawn Initiative, trying to reframe Israel and America relationships. We published it last January, understanding Trump is won the elections, and we need to take advantage of the Trump administration to reframe and restructure Israeli-American relationships. We call that from a client to an ally. If we will frame it America first, but Israel first. I mean by that Israel needs to take care of its own interest, and America needs to take care of its own interest. The MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding that the support, the financial support that American government is giving Israel is today 0.67% of Israeli GDP. And we're paying 50% of diplomatic weight and capabilities for the insignificant amount of money. So we need to stop that tomorrow morning. But the more important message is Israel is an independent country. We have our own sovereign decisions, our own interest. You, America, have your own sovereign decisions. We are allies like South Korea, like Taiwan, like Japan. We're another ally. We're an important ally. We're, I think, much more beneficiary for America than Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. We're not asking you to fight our wars. We're not asking you to have a big army to defend us like Taiwan and Japan are asking you to. We never asked America to fight our wars. Actually, we prefer America not fighting here in Gaza. We prefer you get out. You forced yourself on us. That needs to be very clear.
Well, it's America forced themselves on Israel, but Israel kind of introduced them into the region, into that specific conflict, in the sense that when you're asking for munitions and you're asking for the degree of assistance that Israel was asking for, it is fair for people in American politics to say, hey, we should have a
I
say in
agree. That's why I'm saying we need to restructure that. First of all, it's a disgrace that we're asking for for gifts. We don't need American money, period. Israel has enough money to fund its own munitions. We screwed up the IDF military. We can elaborate on that later. Screwed up not buying enough munitions. I think it was on purpose. We can debate that. But we need to buy it in full price. We need to fight. We should buy everything. We don't need to get help and gifts from other countries and pay a diplomatic strategic cost for that. That's a crucial point here. The second part here is how we leverage actually our abilities from military infrastructure. We sell weapons to Europe tomorrow morning. Billions of dollars of weapons we're selling out to Europe because America is unwilling to sell them. So in the timeline of building the armies, the Europeans need us. And we're still letting the Europeans go against us in every international forum possible. So the Americans are leveraging the fact that they're giving us gifts, military gifts. We need to stop that and be dependent. And we should, on the other hand, be much stronger and independent in negotiating with the Europeans. So Israel, its internal Israeli issue, needs to see itself as an independent sovereign state, much stronger. Say, America, my friend, we love you. Israel first. You take care of America. We take care of Israel.
what politicians in the space today are on board with that.
I think not enough Israeli politicians address these issues in depth. And again, this is a problem of Israeli politics against another big issue we can discuss. I think on the left, everyone is eager to be as much as the biggest client of America. You can see all the Israeli generals before they left their tenure in the chief of staff, Gantz, Eisenkot, Erzi Halevi, Aviv Kochavi, all of them got a medal from the American Army or American Pentagon as a representation of their support or their leadership. They were puppets. They were working with them. That's part of how the Pentagon is working with Israel. They see us as a client. These people are today politicians. They're totally connected to the American establishment, which is not the political establishment most of the time. Now, that definitely influences how they make decisions in Israel. I don't think it's a betrayal. I don't think it's illegal, but I think it is a state of mind, how they think about the Israeli-American relationships.
Well, it's also pathetic that that Israel has to outsource a lot of the education, even just the concept of the Wexner Foundation and what's going on, that you're actually going to go to America to learn about morals. Can't Israeli leaders within the IDF learn about these things on their own? Why do you have to go to America?
That's not outsourcing. That is an NGO sending Israelis, provincial Israelis, to learn in Harvard, like the beautiful Kennedy Business School or nonsense like that. It's worldwide is doing that. It's not only Israel. Part of it is a social structure to connect them to these people. Now, there is importance for international affairs. Israelis have to be connected to the empire. America is an empire. We have to know how to work with it. But we could not forget about our sovereignty. We not forget about the fact that we are responsible for our state, not for the future of America. So it is complicated to manage these things. Unfortunately, most of the Knesset members are not involved in international affairs in a deep manner. Most of the political, even ministers, are not involved in international affairs. They're very local, provincial politicians. The handful of politicians who understand geopolitics, most of them are influenced by, let's say, the old perspective of Israeli national foreign affairs. And that is the generals. I think you'll see Cohen is part of it. I think they're compromised by Qatar. I think there's a lot of issues there that we need to address. I think the next generation of leaders in Israel, take, for example, Ofer Winter. I don't know if you're familiar with the name. He's a general. I believe he's going to run for office with his own party in the next elections. I think he's different, and he's a representation of the new generation of leaders in Israel. I think David Zini is not compromised by the Americans, the new head of the Shin Bet. And I think Roman Goffman is not compromised like that. So there's a new generation of leaders that are different. The old generation are totally compromised.
You say that, and it seems like Bibi's going to win the next election, and there are significant facts on the ground. I know people like to say facts on the ground when it comes to Judea and Samaria or whatever is going on in Gaza, but there are facts on the ground when it comes to diplomatic capital that's being expended right now as a result of the epic failures. I hate saying just October 7th, of the 2 decades of horrendous policy that led to October 7th. The culmination was October 7th. How do you navigate the capital that's being expended right now with being able to then chart a new path? Even if Ofer Winter or other people become leaders, what are they actually going to be able to lead once you've now solidified this transient American and foreign influence in Israel's operations?
So I think I'm very optimistic about Israel. I think the next decade would be the best decade of Israel economics, national security, strategic position worldwide. I'm saying it. If you can see the shekel now, it's like 3.18 already. And the business sector is investing in Israel today for very good reasons. Despite all the criticism, and I have a lot of criticism about what Israel did in the past 2 years, and the past 20 years, and past 40 years, I can sit with 10 hours with you and criticize everything. Bottom line, today, Israel's economy will boom in the next decade dramatically for many reasons. Israel's national security position, geopolitical position today. We're going to have a deal announced, I believe, next week or the following week with Saudi Arabia. We're going to have a deal with Indonesia, which are strategic.
And you think the Saudi Arabia deal is going to include a path to a Palestinian state?
No.
Okay.
There's no the Palestinian state is off the table. Not only in the Israeli discourse and the Israeli public position, I think the world doesn't give about the Palestinians, doesn't care about them anymore. For good reasons. They failed. They tried to push Israel with military power, and they succeeded too much on October 7th, and that's why they're going to fail now. Gaza, no one cares about Gaza anymore. Judea and Samaria, today what's happening in Judea and Samaria is very optimistic. They're paving roads, they're rebuilding infrastructure. Like the pendulum is moving towards Israel now, not towards the Palestinians. I understand the perspective from America is different. I just got a picture from a friend of mine showing the stands in a bookstore that, like, international affairs and current affairs, Gaza, Palestinians, Gaza, all books about Gaza and Palestinians and against Israel. I understand the world discourse is totally against Israel. That counters facts, what's happening now, and investments, and where people see the future of Israel. Israel today is dominating the Middle East militarily. We're influencing today in Iraq. We attacked Iran. We decide what's happening in Syria now. Jordan is under our total influence. Now, we have still things to fix. I'm not underestimating it. We have still threats. I think Egypt is a future dramatic threat for Israel. We can talk about the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a threat for the world. The next threat, international threat, much more, I think, than China, is the Muslim Brotherhood, which is different than ISIS. There's a significance between the two of them, but that's a threat, and Israel needs to address it. But geopolitically, Israel, I long Israel, okay? Invest in Israel today, you will see the benefits in the next decade dramatically. That's where Israel is today. We need to fix a lot.
I'm not quite sure I share all of your optimism, but you talk about, for example, the world opinion, right? There is a major issue going on in the sense that, justified or not, there are horrendous images that were broadcast out of Gaza for 2 years straight. So Jews, the Jewish state, killing people in a justified fashion or an unjustified fashion, and having every single thing recorded and broadcast on Al Jazeera by Qatar for 2 years does have a downstream impact. So I'm not sure exactly how that's going to shake out, but it is something to consider when it comes to, we talk about the Harvard Kennedy schools, or it might be, justified or not, it looks bad. And that's something that I'm not sure we've fully seen the fruit of that just yet. Again, you have investments now, and I'm not saying that people do not appreciate and are actually on Israel's side, but when you have people that are perhaps not as sophisticated, right? You had 33% or so of the Jews in New York voted for Mamdani, right? So I do think that there is a strategic calculus that has to be considered when it comes to the fact that there just was an ongoing war for 2 years. I don't think anybody would have a positive feeling toward Assad, for example. Now, very different wars, very different justification, very different behavior. But the way that it's portrayed on Al Jazeera does not do Israel any favors.
I'll give you an example how I think about geopolitics and what's important in geopolitics. And I'm a realist. That means power matters, success matters. If I would have told you a year ago or 3 years ago that Israel would attack Iran unilaterally with no attack by Iran earlier, will destroy its nuclear facilities, for 12 days will kill its leadership of its military, will destroy everything, and then America will come with the last bomb and destroy like Fordo, and nothing will happen. The world will continue as it was. Russia will not join the attack. No one will attack Israel about anything. It will be crazy statement if you were sitting in the cabinet or in the State Department trying to gameplay what's going to happen in the Israeli attack. That scenario will be the best case scenario. You know why? Because it was successful. Because we won that war in a very clear, decisive way. I think we could have done a little better in other places. But eventually, the attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities was a great success, and no one mentions that today. We almost opened a nuclear international third world war with that attack. Russia could have joined. Pakistan could have joined. You have no clue.
The fact that Hezbollah didn't do anything. Right?
Hezbollah, that was the best case scenario.
Right.
And the world doesn't care about that. Now, why is that? Because it was a clear, decisive victory. The war in Hezbollah, we killed 5,000 Hezbollah operatives. Not enough. We still have 40,000 more. We destroyed towns in southern Lebanon. No one cares. You know why? It was a clear victory. Again, we should have done better. I have plenty of podcasts and arguments what we should have done better.
We discussed this before, that we actually think it's going to there's going to be another front.
It's going to have another front, right? It's going to be a fourth Lebanese war. They're already planning. There's going to be a civil war in Lebanon. A lot of mistakes. Doesn't matter. The world perception on that is, okay, you were attacked, you destroyed them, good for you.
Right.
A war per se is not a problem. A war that is not has no decisive end is a problem. That is not a clear victory is a problem. The Gaza situation is much more complicated because we decided not to win that war. It was too complicated for our leadership, and it's mostly the military leadership, but not only, because of the hostage situation. It was very complicated, and we were stuck for 2 years without the ability to have a real decisive victory. That turned out to backlash us on the international affairs.
Correct. And I also think, just reviewing the latest report that came out about the investigation into the investigation into the investigation. If you want to talk about Israeli bureaucracy, that's a great indication of how bureaucratic things are. But there was one line that really stood out to me in particular, and I wrote about it, which was that the defense leaders noticed and said and warned that something was going to happen because of the judicial reform, whatever they claimed, and they didn't make any adjustments.
Oh, that's
so how do you say that in good faith and go on stage, or Yoav Gallant stands there on March 23rd and says this, like, this is a threat to the security and I'm very scared that we could get attacked and they see us and the whole thing. And then you don't make any adjustments?
Oh, first of all, they talked about Hezbollah.
But right, of course.
It wasn't Hamas on the table.
But even Hezbollah, they didn't make any adjustments. I'm talking if we want to go into what that looked like on October 8th or October 9th. Or
I
October
was
10th.
there.
Right. So my point is, it's just like the level of incompetence and the fact that they just want to blame this on Bibi. And I'm not giving Bibi a free pass by any means, but the idea that you would get up there, put your name forward like Yoav Gallant did, and say, you need to stop this because we're under threat. They're going to see us divided, weak, and everything. And then you don't even make any adjustments. What accountability is there?
There's no accountability. They're politicians with uniforms. They're politicians with military infrastructure. By the way, it's a world historical fact. Generals are politicians. Their goal is to gain power. That's why I'm a realist. A realism says, look at the world as it is. Generals have a lot of power, crazy amount of budgets, good salaries, and they're brave people and they're courageous. But you need to see and understand what's their incentive structure. And the second, Netanyahu is threatening their conception, how they think about military thought, their connections with American. What's their, let's say, their equal group, who they care about their opinions. That's the CNN, it's New York Times, it's the generals in the Pentagon, or it's the Israeli government. Who are their peers inside Israel? And when you see the social structure of the IDF and the Shin Bet that was now penetrated and changed. David Zini, as the head of the Shin Bet, you can't understand. It's like putting an idol in the Mikdash. Like it's the worst enemy ever of that social group of these Israeli wasps, right. Yes, that controlled Israel till 2 years ago. And it's changing. The right in Israel has woken. It was very weak since the beginning of Israel. It was mostly negative against the left doctrine, the left governance of Israel. Even politically in 1977, when Menachem Begin took over, if you read his policies, if you understand what he did, it's mostly extreme left to left socialist policies, most of them, not all of them. He did some good things anecdotally, but he left the unelected bureaucrats to run the country. And then you have the Supreme Court taking over the leadership of the country. And since the disengagement from the Gaza Strip in 2005, the right woke up. And in the past 20 years since then, what happened, and that's what we do in Cherut, part of it, is we're actually trying to articulate what's the definition of having a right-wing movement, a conservative movement in Israel. What are the ideas we're trying to address? Not only, we're religious Jews in Israel, so say thank you for everything we have. It's like, no, there are real issues we need to address and offer. We call it a positive alternative. What are we trying to offer? So we can't have a socialist state. We need to have free markets. We need to grow much more. We're talking about Israel's today is like $55,000, $60,000 per capita GDP. How do we get to $100,000? Why are the Mamdani voters, or not the Mamdani, the 70% who did not vote for Mamdani from New York, where are they moving now? Are they moving to Florida? Or they're moving to Israel? Because now what's the difference between Florida and Israel? Big difference. In Florida, you can be very freedom. In Israel, you can't be free, to be honest. You can be nationally free in some ways, but economically and government-wise, it's very complicated. We need, that's on us, on the right in Israel, to change Israel to to lower the barrier for Jews to come to Israel. So improving Israel is strategic, and the right woke up. So it's offering alternative for the leadership of the IDF. It's offering alternative for leadership of the Shin Bet. It's offering alternative for judges. If Simcha Rotman was alone in the committee to appoint judges, Supreme Court judges, he has no one to appoint. I know that as a fact because I'm actually educating and training the future judges of Israel. That's what we do. Economists, national security leaders, all of these, the right was not addressing these challenges. In the past 15, 20 years, it started. In the past 5 to 10 years, the pace became dramatically faster. And I believe that in the next 10 years, the conservative right will lead Israel, which will totally change the trajectory for Israel for the best.
It's going to be a process, of course, right? Because as we sit here today, like you said, there's no one really on the bench. And I think there's also a perception issue, which is that certainly in English media, which is why I always want to talk to you and like-minded people, in English media, there isn't really so much a conservative voice coming out of Israel, because what they would say is, oh, we're opposed to a Palestinian state, and that's somehow conservatism.
I
So
agree.
if you were to ask the average American, Jewish or not Jewish, if they're going to say, what does the conservative movement look like in Israel? I would argue that 99% of people have absolutely no idea.
I agree. That's what I'm trying to do. I built this movement in Israel in the past decade. I was not the only one, but I was deeply involved, and I think my institution is leading the establishment of the conservative movement in Israel. And I think today it's flourishing, and telling the story and explaining to Americans what that is. I agree. I totally agree with you. Americans don't understand, American Jewry, definitely the conservative ones, don't understand the Israeli politics. I think it's a combination of a little bit of condescending and a little bit of like viewing things from an American perspective. So that's Israel. There's a handful of people who are very savvy and understand what's happening in Israeli internal politics.
Right.
The fact that people consume podcasts like Call Me Back and think that is a conservative podcast. That's not the fact. Internal politics, that's from the left to the left, extreme left. Davial is an extreme left a journalist, like taking the most extreme left journalist from New York Times and saying he's a conservative. That's a misunderstanding of Israeli internal politics. But we need to be much better. We need to have enough people to speak fluent English who can explain and articulate exactly what our ideas are, and explain, as I said, positive alternatives for these policies. We need to have a better leadership, aside of Netanyahu, which is a conservative by idea. We can say rhino, like a Republican in name only.
Right. It's
So
also,
Netanyahu,
he's been around for so long.
so long. And following that statement, Israeli politicians, all of them are from the 90s. There you have Deri, Gafni, Litzman, Lieberman, Gidon Sar, Netanyahu, like all of them from the 90s. And the younger generation, like Benny Gantz and others, are media people or generals from the 90s who became politicians in the 2000s. We have, there's no political entrepreneurship in Israel for systematic reasons. They build a guild that will change the second Netanyahu leaves. I believe it's going to happen in 28.
Do you think that there's any chance to actually, and there's a lot to unpack with what you just said. I'll just throw it out there. I think that as an American, I think watching what's going on in Israel very closely, I do think Israel needs term limits. I think it's kind of crazy that you could be prime minister for close to quarter century and that's what's going on. I think just watching it as Israel has democratic ideas, I'm not one of these people. It's like Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. I think it's not democracy in the sense that Americans would understand democracy. I mean, you talk about understanding the differences, right? Also in Israel, people see someone walking with a black hat who's a Shas voter and they say, oh, that's a right-wing extremist. Shas is not a right-wing party.
It's a
socialist party that is religious.
Right.
And I think that that's also part of the lack of proper education. And to me, I think one of the strategic factors also at play when you talk about shows like Call Me Back and some of the guests and everything like this is just the sense that I think there's a Judaism that's independent of Zionism. That's not to say that Israel isn't important to Jewish people. Israel is important to Jewish people, but actually understanding Jewish ideas, right? Jewish ideas existed in 1946 or 1947. It wasn't that the second Ben Gurion got up there and declared that Israel is an independent state, that all of a sudden Jewish ideas all of a sudden could stand on their own. No, Jewish ideas come from the Torah. So this concept also that many people are basically teaching this kind of identity politics of Israel is also leading to some of this confusion, because when they see Israel, they're saying, oh, well, I live in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, or I live in Los Angeles, and I want Israel to look like us because we're democracies and yay, democracy. But that's like really not what nation building looks like or how things should be done.
So you addressed many issues now. So let's start from the beginning. Americans have a problem understanding Israeli democracy because it's a different democracy. When America was established, America wanted a king, but a limited king. It wanted a king that has a limitation by constitution, a limitation by election every 4 years to be reelected, with no term limit, by the way. And if he wants to go beyond,
right, but we made adjustments.
I know. But if you want to go beyond the boundaries of the Constitution and limits, you need to go to Congress and Senate. Basically, that's the premise. But you have a commander-in-chief. There's one person who acts like a king, moves around the world like a king, can make any decision he wants like a king, but limited. The parliamentary system is very different. People ask questions about accountability in Israel. How come Netanyahu is not quitting? Because he's accountable, he's the head, he's responsible. There's no such thing as a prime minister in Israeli parliamentary system. The theory, the political science theory behind the parliamentary system is we don't want a king. We prefer a committee. There's no one person responsible. The government always needs to vote on everything. Everything the government approves. It's a bunch of 37 people. Now, I hope you never managed a committee of 7 people, let alone 37 people.
I can't deal with a committee of 3 people.
Exactly. It's very hard to build a coalition. It's very hard to manage. You always compromise about everything. Saying Netanyahu made that decision, you can't compare Netanyahu to Trump. Trump has a sovereignty to make every call he wants, and then he can ask him and appeal against the Supreme Court or a circuit judge or whatever, or go to the Senate and try to override his decision. The prime minister cannot make every decision he wants. He has to convince his coalition every time. That's the theory behind the limited government in the parliamentary system. That's why term limits doesn't mean anything. Because there's no one person. There is a coalition. The problem with...
Well, wait. But I think it's a personality thing. So it wouldn't necessarily be even term limits on being a prime minister. It'd be, I think, term limits being in the Knesset, because there is an issue now where I think there's bleed over in the complete disdain for Bibi personally from some people versus his ideas. And I think that it's not helpful. And this is someone, I'm not even commenting on a specific policy. I just don't think it's good for any person. In the same way that I oppose Yair Lapid being there for 20 years or anyone else, I think it's a problem.
Do you have term limits on senators?
No, I think it's a problem.
Great. My argument is open the market and have a better free market of politicians and to be elected. Today, I have a lot of friends who want to go to Knesset today. They have zero chance. The threshold is 150,000 votes to pass the threshold national-wide, competing with everyone. You don't have a district of yourself, so you can't invest in it, concentrate in one place to get your votes. Funding, Israeli election system. Today, existing party in the Knesset gets 70% of its funding. Just to give you a math, Gidon Sar has 5 Knesset members today. He has zero support in the public. It doesn't matter. He has tomorrow morning 8 million shekels to start a campaign. If I want to run for office tomorrow morning, I need to have 8 million shekels. I'm limited to get 10,000 shekels from every individual. So that's 10,000 shekels times 800 people just to get where Gidon Sar is starting today with cash from the government. So the entire system is totally converted towards existing politicians, and the media is totally for existing politicians from the left. So a young conservative in Israel has zero chances for running for office today. So the lack of competition enables these old guards to control Israeli politics.
So you're saying about the barrier to entry for existing politicians?
There's no way, or it's very, very complicated for a young conservative politician, well, wannabe politician, to run for office and succeed. The systematic barriers are so high. We want to change it. We're trying now to lower the threshold. We're trying to change the funding system. But
of course, all the elected politicians are going to be against you.
Probably. Of course. But that is the reason for the lack of competition. Everyone knows our current politicians are, let's say, limited, understating it. Okay, they're not the best politicians. There's no real competition. That's the reason. And if we would have a better competitive system, better people will go in the system today. The term limit does not serve anything. in my perspective, that's a limit. Again, going back to political science theory, limiting the ability of the public to choose who they want, I think that's a problem. Now, if you have concentration of power, there's a good reason to term limit. If you have all the power, so you said power corrupts, let's limit the amount of time you can have the power. But if you don't really have the power as a prime minister, why should I limit you? Why aren't you limiting the bureaucrats? You can see the bureaucrats running in offices from office to office for decades. No one cares. No one's limiting. By the way, I'm offering to limit their ability to
No, what I'm actually saying to limit all of that. I mean, I'm not saying this is just
the
one
political
position.
world.
I'm saying, for example, in the military doctrine, and there's been several books and articles published about this since October 7th. But I think that the way in which the lack of accountability and the fact that in Israel everybody knows everyone and it's a small, obviously very small country. I just think that some of the personality issues are corrupting the larger conversation. Like, you're trying to have a conservative conversation and people will immediately say, oh, Bibi, right wing, I hate Bibi. Oh. That's not a conversation. In the same way that they say, oh, judicial reform, we hate judicial reform. That's not, we're talking about ideas. Like, I would argue that most of the ideas you're talking about like, even when it comes to judicial reform, most Israelis agree that something is necessary. I think that a lot of it came from how it was done and also the fact that it's Bibi. So
I agree but disagree. I apologize. I agree that that's how it's represented. I agree there's a social element in the political disputes in Israel. But people matter, as do ideas. So we always talk about two pillars of decision making. We have the ideas, and you have the people who are the vessels to promote these ideas. They're significant, both of them. We don't sit in an abstract world talking about abstract ideas, how to implement them. The people are important. His incentives, why is he doing it, who he is, how compelling he is. All these things are important. And saying these are personal politics, of course it's personal. These are people who are running them, and gaining the trust of the public is important, and your social support is important. Trying to turn politics into a cleaner game and nice and neat. No, politics is dirty. Put that on the table. You know why? Because that's human nature. People are vindictive. People are personal. People get insulted. People have incentives. People have interests. That's human nature. It's good. That's facts. Do you want to improve people? Do you want virtuous people to run for politics? Great. I'm for that. But understand that they will have to address these issues. And politics is complicated, and you have to have good, strong people. I'll give you a statement. Without Netanyahu, the war would have ended after 2 months with a deal with Hamas controlling 100% of the Gaza Strip, the IDF withdrawing without attacking Hezbollah and destroying it, and without attacking Iran, without taking over Syria. That's a fact. Netanyahu went 90% against the system. Netanyahu went 100% against 90% of the system by himself, with zero support of most of the people, even that surround him.
Right, but I would just say that he created the system to an extent.
I don't disagree with that.
So, yeah.
But eventually, the situation in the past years, he fixed his ways. I agree. He appointed Herzi Halevi.
Even just the idea that you're going to say that these massive terror armies are going to grow on your borders, that is his idea.
Much more complicated. That's the limitation of power of a prime minister. You need to understand that's a feature. No, so he has a boundary where he can move and maneuver in front of the bureaucrats. Now, the fact that he was alone as a prime minister with no real fellowship anywhere, people who understand his ideas. You know, he walked today in the Knesset, and he always goes with a book. Right. Now, I know as a fact, Netanyahu reads 2 books a week, English history books, most of them. And he's reading now, forgot the name, Rome and the Jews. And I started listening to the book on Audible a couple of weeks ago. By the way, Audible, if you're listening, he's reading the book. It's not good. Someone else should read the book out loud. It's not good. But he's an intellectual who understands history. Absolutely. He gets it. 19 Knesset members never read 2 books in the past 15 years. It puts him in a different position. Now, understanding the world, understanding history. Now, he made a lot of mistakes. And he goes in the Knesset, he sees all these midgets. He lives in Lilliput. and they don't understand the ideas. I never sit in a cabinet meeting, but I have a lot of friends who do. And the stories that I hear from there are pathetic. These are not your cabinet that you choose the people you want, like
Correct.
Trump chose. You have these politicians, which are limited, which are not smart, which have the ability to be elected by the public. They're limited. That's politics. And the conversations there are sometimes pathetic. They're not what we imagine a cabinet meeting will be. And he's sitting there, the brilliant guy, the IQ of 180, and sitting with them. And he needs to convince them. And he feels alone. I have no one to discuss with, aside of Ron Dermer. That he left now. You know why he left? Because the bullies from the left attacked his wife and his kids on a daily basis. There are protests in front of his house on a daily basis from Yom Kippur to Rosh Hashanah every day. It's crazy.
Mind you, he had 2 sons fighting in Gaza as well. So it's
Ron Dermer
crazy.
should be the next prime minister. He could never be, because he doesn't have the campaigning ability like Ben Gvir does. It's again, politics. The man is important. Now, Netanyahu, you can blame him for not building the system. He's responsible for that, obviously, for appointing the wrong people. He never had the right people. Going back to the argument that the right only woke up 20 years ago, trying to structure some kind of conservative movement. Netanyahu is alone. Netanyahu has, in the past, since 1980, when he was starting Israeli politics, he had no one with him. He doesn't understand that there is a conservative movement. He's sitting in his office, not connected to the movement in any way. So I can blame him for a lot of things. You understand that the position today, the place where the Israeli conservative movement is standing today, it's not where it was 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. Netanyahu is unaware, and he doesn't trust, and he doesn't know. And remember, every person he appointed stabbed him in the back, aside of Ron Dermer.
Right.
They were forced by the system to stab him, to go against him, to testify against him. Like every good person that was with him. He has trust issues with a good reason.
Right.
So again, Netanyahu is not the issue. Government in Israel is the issue. It's based on people. People are complicated. We are trying to educate and enable the best people to rise. You don't have one person running the country. You have 200 people running the country, from legal advisors to ministers, to the staff of the ministers, to the leading generals in IDF, to economists, to business leaders. There's a lot of people running the country. And if the right in Israel, the conservative right in Israel, wants to offer an alternative, it needs to have 2,000 people that are able to come instead of these 200 people, at least 100 out of them. And it will take time. And Netanyahu is not in that process. So if we can represent Netanyahu as the last king, the last prime minister of the period of the establishment of the state of Israel, like the 75 years of the battle for existence, and we're going and entering a new period of the state of Israel. Israel exists. We don't fight for our existence anymore. There's no threat for the Israeli Jewish existence in the state of Israel. The question is, will we flourish or will we decline culturally? And that's where we are today. And that needs to be a much deeper moral argument, a deeper identity connected to the Jewish identity that you said. But if you go to yeshivot today, yeshivot in Israel, that study, we call it Hilchot Nida, they study Hilchot Brachot, it's very important. But do they study Hilchot Medina, the rules of how to run a country? I know pretty well the Jewish library. Can you show me Hilchot Medina instead of like 2 pages in the Rambam? There's nothing there. And try to extract concepts. It's very complicated and blurry. And if you go to yeshiva, every yeshiva in Israel, do they argue the state of Israel is a manifestation of redemption, of Geulah? Okay, so running a country is what we dreamt for 2,000 years. How do we do it in a Jewish way? Does a state put tefillin on? No. So what does a Jewish state do? How does it run its economy? How does it run its judiciary? It's only religious people who go into judiciary or running the IDF, but do the same thing as the secular ones, or they do different things. These are questions that are not addressed in the religious yeshivot world yet. Because, first of all, they don't have the knowledge in political science, in understanding how to run a country, to have these conversations regarding to, as like in the same way they have the knowledge in Hilchot Brachot.
Right.
So changing the yeshivot world is one step. The Haredi world, unfortunately, is not even debating that it's
Well, yeah,
important to do
you were
that.
talking about yeshivot in Israel. I'm like, okay, I don't even want to touch the Haredi issue this second, but
Yeah,
that's
I talk about the Zionist religious yeshivot. So saying this is a Jewish world that based on Jewish ideas, that I'm addressing your second question. You're totally right. We're not there yet. We're a decade, 2 decades far from that, even maybe a century. You know, when Joshua came into the land of Israel, it took him 370 years from Joshua till Samuel. From Yeshua to Shmuel, where the Mishkan, the tabernacle, was in Shiloh. And only then we started to build a kingdom. 370 years we were divided by tribes. It takes time to build a nation. It takes time to build a country. Even America, 13 colonies in 1776. It took them time to move after the Virginia leadership and go to the new generation. And they had a big civil war after 75 years to restructure their identity. And then, if you're aware of the most, I think one of the most important speeches in American history, in my limited knowledge of American history, called The New Nationalism by Teddy Roosevelt, trying to rearticulate where we're going. And that's where the progressive era started, where we're still there trying to define and articulate the American nationalism. We have the same issue today in Israel. We're trying to rearticulate what the Jewish national identity is in Israel. And the war definitely triggered a lot of these conversations, but someone needs to start working on answers. And we don't have enough people addressing these challenges.
Well, I would just add that as an American Jew, I think that as Israel talks about these issues of nationalism, I actually think it's extremely important, and I might be stepping in it here a little bit, but I think it's extremely important that Israel has these conversations in a way that's actually detached from American Jewry, in the sense that Israel and Jews in Israel considering these issues in a deep intellectual way with absolutely no regard for what American Jewry says or what American Jewry actually thinks. I think that it's introducing all sorts of lines that get tangled, right? If the Federation of New York says that it's important that we give Israel $1 million so that we can kind of redeem our image and give money to the Gazans, I think is obscene. And I think that by having such an intertwined relationship on a communal level in which somehow ideas of Americans living in America can kind of be put on par or influence the nationalistic thinking of Israelis, I think that's deeply, deeply troubling. I think it's problematic, and I think it actually stunts the growth of Israelis actually having these very important conversations.
I will answer with a question as a Jew.
Yes.
If Israel would have changed the law, the law of return, but the Israeli one, and say, if you didn't come to the land of Israel in the past 75 years, that's your problem. If you want a Jew, these are the rules of immigration to Israel. Now, it's not because you're a Jew. We will ignore the fact that you're a Jew, and we're the state of the Jews who came on time. Will you accept that?
I haven't considered this question. I would say that the issue is you have people coming from countries that genuinely have issues, right? So if you're a Jew, for example, in Venezuela, say 7 to 10 years ago, and all of a sudden everything's falling apart there, not necessarily from an anti-Semitic perspective, but just the societal fabric is exploding, I think that that's a challenge. But if you were to say from America, I'm actually open to that, because if you look statistically, American Jews really haven't come. So I'm actually not,
so then people haven't come either. They could have come and they didn't come.
I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed to it in principle.
I'm not for it for one reason, because that's why I'm responding to your question. Yes. The Israeli state, the state of the Jews, is part of the Jewish identity. It's not the only manifestation of the Jewish identity, and it's connected to the nation. It's connected to the religion. It's another layer of the Jewish identity. It's a significant one. It's an important one, but it's not the only one. And understanding that Israel needs to make, and there's no room for American Jewry voting in Israel, I think it should definitely take in consideration the American Jewry's position. Now, the problem is that the American conservative consideration is, let's say, weaker than the American progressive one. But in 15 years from now, 25 years from now, the American left progressive opinion about Israel will decrease dramatically because they have no kids and they don't have a strong future. The American Jewry will be dominated by either Haredi, either a modern Orthodox, or conservative secular, which is a slim population American Jewry. So the dominant voice will be much more conservative. So maybe it will be a good thing then. My argument is Israel's nation is part of the Jewish identity. Israel religion is part of the Jewish identity. We should not ignore either one of them. The responsibility comes with authority. That means whoever lives in the state of Israel has a vote. If you don't live, you're not part of it. But we, as a nation, have responsibility for the Jewish identity worldwide. I think that's a crucial part of the state of Israel. So that's why I don't think we can ignore it.
I think that there's just an issue in that if you keep having, if that outlook it continues to be the way in which Israel sees itself to the American Jewish community, the American Jewish community keeps expanding the boundaries of what's acceptable in terms of what's a Jewish idea, right? You're arguing, okay, that the next generation, say, for example, coming from Reform synagogues, they might not be involved. The thing is that as was demonstrated with the Mamdani election and across the country, there is a certain kind of detachment from the root, and that, and also the what actually defines a Jew continues to expand, right? So now you'll have someone whose grandfather's Jewish might be welcomed to one of these synagogues and be considered as Jewish as you and me. Whether or not they are is not for, right? So my concern though is just that if Israel wants to grow up as a country and actually have nationalism as on a diplomatic level, I think that it's important for them to be able to just say that while we care for individuals based on their religion as their co-religionists, ultimately tuning out some of these the opinion or the what the feelings are of certain communities in a foreign country. I just don't understand why. I don't think it's healthy for the discourse in Israel.
I agree that we need to be much more sober about how we address it in the weight of it in our decision making. It needs to be much weaker in its weight when we like weigh all the sides of the conversation, but we cannot ignore it. And I think that's a very significant part of Judaism. It's called a relationship that is based on a covenant, not on a deal, not a contract.
Correct.
The covenantal Judaism means it doesn't matter if you're Esav, you're still my son. You're still related. And Esav's son is part of us too. And I think if we look at the Jews historically, there's a book now published in Israel about the Russian immigrants in Israel, like the Jews or the partial Jews.
Right.
It's a very complicated issue. And a woman called Alex, forgot her family name. Very interesting that the headline of the book is More Jewish Than You. She's trying to compare her Judaism going to fight in Gaza. Take an example, General Roman Goffman. Before he got married, I think him or his wife, it's part of the book, needed to reconvert to Judaism because it wasn't clear how Jewish was her parents. So they came to Israel, but getting married was complicated. But he was fighting on October 7th and part of the Jewish nation. But the Haredi are Jewish, but they're not part of the battle, sitting aside during the war. So her argument is maybe by halacha in the religious argument, and Rav Eliezer Melamed is deeply involved in that, in trying to define Zera Israel is religious. It's a complicated issue we need to address in a much more flexible perspective, because I think our obligation to our people is a crucial part of the state of Israel. Saying that, we need to be very sober about the external parts of the diaspora. We need to understand that the weight needs to be weaker, and we can demand. You want to have an opinion here? Great. Come to a kibbutz, come to Birthright, be part of it. You cannot stand aside and criticize.
Well, but I would just say that this also requires Israel growing up in terms of how things are funded. Because, for example, if you look at, say, JNF, I went to JNF at a conference here 2 weeks ago, and a lot of very nice people there. To me, I almost wanted to vomit from the perspective that there's no off-ramp. It's just people having to raise money for pretty vital institutions in Israel, and these institutions are super excited to just get money from the diaspora. I think that a lot of these programs, or for when it comes to infrastructure projects should be handled by Israel.
I'm
And
totally
I think that it kind of leads to this double standard because people say, how I can't criticize, but you're going to come and ask me for my pushka for $1,000. I don't think that's fair. And I think that Israel has to grow up and stop this.
I totally agree with you that Israel needs to, first of all, the civil society in Israel needs to be stronger in Israel, funded by Israelis. We will get there in 15 years. We're not there yet. The amount of wealth in Israel, accumulative wealth,
Right.
is not there yet. We don't have 200 years of growth like American Jewry has. And gaining capital. We're a socialist country. The fact that the past 10 years or 15 years we had a dramatic increase in our GDP doesn't mean we have wealth. There's a big difference between the two. But in 15, 20, 25 years will be different. Number one. Number two, I think the American Jewry's willingness and ability to support Israel is a good thing. It's part of the covenant and the connection. I'm not against it. And we need to be very gracious about it. But, and this is where JNF and other institutions, they all need to be closed. That means if there is an interest of a specific Jew to invest in a specific future, how he perceives the future of Israel, I'm totally for it. If there are American institutions like the Federation of New York or other federations, it's fair enough. They want to work together, invest in Israel, I'm for that. If there are Israeli institutions, national institutions who are collecting money from American Jewry, I'm against that because Israel as a state has enough money. It's a nuance.
Yeah, but my point is that if we're trying to if we want Israel to grow up diplomatically, we want Israel to grow up and being self-sufficient in its expenditures when it comes to military. I also think part of that is stop having this attitude of just asking for handouts. And I think that by having this culture in which, oh, we're going to go find some rich person abroad to pay for a decent army base, right? I know you and I were both quoted in the FIDF article in Tablet Magazine, right? How is it that the only way you get a half decent army base in Israel is if some foreign donor pays?
It's a disaster.
Right. So,
but that's the difference between civil society and government. Government, I think we need to close FIDF.
I agree.
FIDF is it's as a soldier. Yes, I think it's an insult. The IDF should fund what soldiers need. Period. It doesn't have a limitation of funding. Trust me, I know the numbers. We just finished a year work in Cherut, re-articulating a national security strategy for Israel. We had fellows working very hard on that. And continuing now another year in research in the economic part of rebuilding the IDF for the next generation. But there's no limitation of money, it's priorities. It's very easy to raise money for FIDF. I think it's wrong. That's institutional money. Civil society, I think it's a very good relationship. I think we should do it from Israel mostly. But in the meantime, if part of the relationship for American Jews to Israeli Jews is through civil society, either welfare or ideas or whatever, I think it's a good thing.
Right. But I think that it's also fostering those relationships, which is so important. Like you said, in civil society, I think that the institutional level is actually harmful for independence and independent thought. And I think that that's part of the reason why we end up in some of these predicaments, because for example, the fact that even take how the American Jewry was responding to after October 7th, right? All of a sudden you have these American Jewish leaders going and talking to Congress and talking to President Biden and going about this thing. I think that on some level, putting the hostage situation aside, but I think that the conversations when it comes to munitions and things like this, it has to be had between Israeli government and the American government. And then when you want to talk about, hey, our kibbutz got blown up or something like this, yeah, if you want to go and make a donation, go make a donation, because you'd help someone just like you'd help someone if they got hurt or injured in America. And I think that these institutions that create this grievance culture and create this, basically this perception that Israel is essentially, it's 1949, is really bad for Israel's development.
I agree. And I will argue even something worse or deeper than that, if I may. I think one of the deepest challenges that American Jewry has, is the success of the state of Israel. If Israel is successful, so it raises two questions. What are you doing here in the States? Why aren't you in Israel? If Israel is the fading state that we believe that it's important, but it's not where you make decisions, so there's importance to be here in the States. But if Israel is the center of gravity of high tech in the world, is successful, it has strong military. There's no, and the GDP is high. It's like it's not a 10% gap, like 90% fall in your quality of life. Why aren't you there? And it's first of all a practical question, and then an identity question. Who are we, American Jewry, if we believe that the future of the people of Israel is in the state of Israel? And you can see that question rising. Now, the more weaker Israel is, the easier the question is. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
The less complicated the question is. Now, I think these are like unconscious, how do you say, subconscious
Right.
subconscious issues in the American Jewry's public subconscious, not as an individuals only, that there's a state of Israel. Why are we here? If you read the Bible, if you read the Ezra and Nehemiah,
I can give you a good answer. I mean, look, we're sitting here in Miami, right? There is a segment, right? I hate when people say, oh, this is what people think. No, I'm not. I'm going to tell you, there is an argument to be made that we pray for the coming of Mashiach, right? We believe that there will be the Jews returning to Israel. Right now, we're talking about a modern political state that's not the same Israel as the coming of Mashiach, and we distinguish between that. This is not to say that as co-religionists and as people who love the land of Israel, that we don't care about the land of Israel, but the state of Israel is different from the land of Israel. And that is a distinction, which is not to say that we wouldn't love to be in Israel, and I don't enjoy seeing the land of Israel, and I love being there, right? But there's a difference between saying I'm pulled because I have a biblical obligation to fulfill a messianic prophecy that is happening this second. That's
before the messianic argument.
Sure.
By the way, there is a difference between, let's say, the Chabad Haredi perspective about Mashiach, and the Rav Kook perspective that
Correct.
It goes gradually from bottom up. I'm on the Rav Kook side, 100%.
So I'm not.
I agree. It's okay. It's okay. We're fair. But I understand the difference in that perspective. I think I'm practically physically bringing the Mashiach. Aside that I think he already came, but put that aside. But the question is a more practical question. Do you understand the future, where the future is, and are you going there? And that is a question. And the answer is that it influences the decision-making and the positions in the political world as we speak. I don't say that I have a clear answer. I made my decisions, or my grandmothers, my grandparents made the decision for me. They left the U.S. in 1950, moving to Israel to the rationing period from a very wealthy family in Boston, in Malden, Massachusetts, moved to Israel in 1950 to the rationing period. And I thank them for that decision. Would I have made the decision if I were sitting in your place here, crazy wealthy, sitting here in New York, in Miami, and questioning the future if I send my kid to die in the army? I don't know. It's a good question. I'm not trying to judge. But eventually, these core identity issues influence the way American Jewry thinks about Israel and how they act. I think the number one institution following this subconscious tension, the number one body that will prevent Israel from stopping the U.S. aid is American Jewry.
Well, because you have a whole thing, and this is not trying to attack AIPAC or anything like this, but they exist to do that.
You said AIPAC. I tried not to say that.
Right.
But eventually, AIPAC is the body who its success is giving aid from America to Israel. And if Israel says, no, we don't want that anymore. So who is AIPAC? What are we doing here?
Well, I think that AIPAC could be an effective lobby as Americans that care about a strong American-Israel relationship. And that American-Israel relationship is not just giving handouts. So I think that you could explore that as a PAC. I think that's great.
So now you're coming to another conversation about the Israeli-American relationship. And if you're arguing for a relationship that is not putting the American interest first, if the argument of AIPAC is, listen, Israel is in the interest of America, that's one argument. If, say, the Israeli-American relationship is the interest of Israel, but America should do it because despite the fact...
Yeah, correct, no.
So it's complicated. So what is AIPAC doing? If it's saving the Jewish people, the poor, almost extincted Jewish people in the land of Israel in 49, in 56, in 67, in 73. So they have a position. So we have our brothers in arms in Nigeria or in Israel, doesn't matter, and they're almost extinct. We should, as the empire, save them. But if it's a successful country, what's the argument? And these are subconscious questions that are rising today. The more Israel is successful, the more questions American jury has, and the more complicated their position, their decision making is. I don't envy American jury. I'm happy where I am, and
Well, actually, let me just say this. I think that the conversations about this have not been happening in earnest in the public from the Jewish perspective enough. And I think that kind of leads to some of the issues where now, when you have people that might not be making these arguments in good faith, but people are very much unprepared to actually engage in those conversations. So if the Jewish community had actually dealt with those questions beforehand, you would have more thought out answers. And I think that that's part of the failure of the groupthink. So I think you can make a very compelling argument that AIPAC and Americans that think that America benefits from a relationship with Israel, that America would stop giving aid to Israel. I think that's a very coherent argument that needs to be put forward, and that gives space to people to actually have that discussion. Whereas instead it was used as a cudgel to smack people and say, oh, you must be anti-Semitic.
Right. First of all, the anti-Semitic argument, I hate it either way, because there's no argument. It's like
the reason people say it is because some people are saying it in bad faith. It's kind of like when Tucker Carlson goes and says that he believes that Christian Zionism is heresy. Now, if you want to go and get 2 or 3 different theologians to come on and you want to talk about what Christians believe, and then you come to the conclusion whether or not you believe in Christian Zionism and that what was intended back when in the New Testament is what they meant with the modern political state of Israel, that's a way to come to that discussion in good faith. The bad faith argument is to come and say, oh, Christian Zionism, heresy. That's
exactly my argument.
Yeah,
it's abstracts.
Correct.
Like, you have no real arguments. You throw abstracts, anti-Semitism, heresy. It means nothing.
Correct.
Let's have a serious conversation now. The problem with the serious, honest conversation about this is that no one has an honest conversation that it means committing suicide. Not practically committing suicide, but identity committing suicide. Who am I? Let's ask me. Because I'm very empathetic to the question, so I will ask myself, if I will come to a conclusion that the IDF committed crimes. Let's go there. It's a question that it's very hard for me to ask myself, because that's who I am. If I have questions about bad things that are happening in Israel, these are hard questions that question my own identity. If I have, let's go to a family perspective.
First of all, I don't think that the crime thing should be so hard.
Bad example. Cut that out edit it out. I'll give another one. My marriage, my wife and kids. If addressing the challenges that you have in marriage are very hard to address them honestly, because the outcome of these conversations sometimes mean you need to get divorced. They're very hard issues, internal issues, psychological issues by yourself that I define my identity through them. It's very hard to address them honestly, because no one goes to its own funeral. Like, it's literally identity committing suicide. And I'm very empathetic to the challenge. I'm not criticizing American jury. I'm representing that the outcomes of the success of the state of Israel influence the practical conversation regarding what Israel needs and it's right for them to do. Now, you're honest enough to say, listen, we should not have a stand in Israel decision making. That's an honest answer. But when it comes to complicated issues that Israel is failing, you do have an opinion, and you come with a strong opinion, and you do whatever you want. But this is my opinion. I respect your opinion, and the opinion is influenced by the identity, why you define yourself connected to the state of Israel, and it's complicated. That's my only argument.
Of course, it's complicated. I'll also just add that from helping people on the ground and being tuned in and attuned to what's going on, I would offer solutions and I try to help where I can go. I'll stay away from motive. That's something I've really tried to do, which is where I think is different than a lot of the commentating coming out of America, because they'll assign something like Benjamin Netanyahu wants endless war and he wants it.
Again, they're quoting the Israeli media. It doesn't matter.
No. I think it does matter, because I think that when you have the chutzpah to assign motive from here, as if someone, I think, is I think it's another level, right? If you're doing something in the media because you're trying to be provocative, right? The New York Post has page 6. Like they're going to do something that's going to sit. They're really good at writing headlines. But if you're quoting that and then going and protesting or doing something like that, I think it just takes on a different level.
Going back to
Yeah,
the political question of ideas and people,
right.
it's a very big social issue.
Correct.
Socially, and during the reform, I had meetings with countless, let's say, high-tech people who are deeply invested in the protests on one hand, but are smart people, billion-dollar companies, founders, and you're having a conversation with them, and you go, let's go to political science. Let's talk limitation of government. You walk them through the the intellectual process, way of thinking,
Right.
and then you end, okay, so now you understand why you need to have a reform. No, you're a fascist, and they agree with you 90% of the way. And when it gets to the social outcome, meaning of that okay, I need to support these Nazis, Ben Gvir and Smotrich, and they will take over the state of Israel to become like a Haredi country with women going in bags around in the street. I can't agree with that. Doesn't matter the logical process. So the influence of social fabric and your peers and your friends on your intellectual decision making is crucial. It's much deeper and much stronger and heavier in the decision process than we even imagine. And again, I understand that. We need to counter that with our own social support, with people having the ability to stay. Several of our alumni from Chirut are leading people in the government. And like there's a majority, like you have a committee, 6 out of 7 people are extreme leftists. And there's one guy saying, you're wrong. You can do that in the first meeting. Second meeting, you're wrong, you're leftist. And the 10th meeting, you're frustrated. You don't do that anymore. So you start to compromise. So how do you keep strong standing on your position while understanding that the social group you're sitting with are a bunch of lefties in the legal leadership? How how many times you can be the opposition and still standing a strong position with influence? It's very hard, the social structure in any decision making. It's on the individual level and definitely on the national level. And the social structure of the Kaplanistim with the high-tech sector embedded together, it's a significant part of the way they make decisions. It's the same thing with American jury. They're sitting in shul together here in Miami and they're discussing Israel. Now, they understand the complication. Again, it's an issue that Israel, in its way, and this is where I come from, Israel needs to understand that complication, respect it, appreciate it, and sometimes ignore it. And take care of what Israel means. But you understand the complication of, you said APEC earlier, trying to convince Israel to not stop the MOU and continue getting. Israel need to make a decision, will we go against APEC and stop it, or we will support that? And listen to APEC because they're our American friends. They support us other places. It's a dilemma.
And to heighten it is a lot of times, and I survived woke education in Newton, Massachusetts, but I would argue that because engagement with Israel has replaced Judaism in a lot of schooling, it introduces all sorts of problems because people's engagement with APAC or engagement with a federation conference is their engagement with Judaism. You've now raised all sorts of theological questions when you're talking about making dramatic turns in how America and Israel interact. And that's where it takes on a whole nother life of its own, because there's all sorts of interests that go well beyond just, okay, what's best for Israel's security doctrine.
But this comes to the disagreement between the two of us. Is Israel a religion or Israel a nationalism and national identity? And what's the balance between the two of them? So sometimes we're a religion, 2,000 years of exile. Sometimes we're a nation when we came out from Joshua to the end of the Second Temple. So that's 1,500 years or 2,000 years. This is 2,000 years. And where are we now? And that's a question. So we're moving from a religion in 47, you said, to a nation, but it's a process. Let's go deeper in theology. The Jewish, let's say, Kabbalic mystical, it's not mysticism, Kabbalah argues that there are 2 stages in Geula. Rabbi Soloveitchik said that in 56, it called Brit Goral and Brit Yehud, the covenant of, let's say, it's destiny and the covenant of meaning. I apologize for my lack of English vocabulary, but Goral is like you're forced to be part of the Jewish nation. You're identified by an external forces. And the next generation is the covenant of meaning, where we are going. So it's a positive identity. There are parallels, Tzion, Yerushalayim, Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. They're all parallels of the two stages of Geulah. And the first one is practically emphasizing on the body, on how to build the physical part of the Jewish nation. And then you implement or add on top of that the theological the theological meaning of it, inside the body, giving the soul inside the physical body. And these stages, we're now in some ways in the midst between the two. So the physical body is built, it's strong, but there's no spiritual soul inside it yet. And the question is, how do you influence that period, that interim period? And it's complicated. And what do you emphasize? What's the cost in the physical world if you put a soul in something? Does it weaken it? Does it strengthen it? And the complications of the process are very, very important. Like we're having Parshat Shavua now, Chai Sarah, this week's portion. And the complicated way that Avraham needs to send his slave to Haran, to like the Americans to find a spouse for his son, that like it's complicated, but the complications create actually a very sophisticated identity of Yitzchak, that he has the influence from Haran. She was born and raised in a very evil family of Aramean thieves, but it's built together and it actually enables the next generation, which is very complicated. Asav and Yaakov is running and he's cheating. It's a very complicated way. If you would imagine the story of how to start the God's chosen people, we have a very simple story, right? Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, they were born, they're beautiful people, perfect people, and it's great. But our story is very complicated because we're trying to balance the tensions between important values, between truth on one hand, but chesed on the other hand, and like the law, and keeping these tensions need to be very, very, first of all, strong in understanding there are tensions. And that's what I'm trying to say from the beginning of the conversation. There's an important segment of Judaism that is called the diaspora. There's an important segment called the State of Israel. What is the right balance, and which is changing? It needs to be very thought through and very humble in every decision you make, looking at that balance, understand the subconscious part of it, understand that appeasing one side is not a solution. You're being strong in your position, the other side, and the combination of all the forces that actually makes the people of Israel.
On that note, I want to conclude, but Amiad, I really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope that your optimism goes from your mouth to God's ears, and there'll continue to be brighter days ahead now, and I wish you all the best and hope to have you back again.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.